The first rule of the Neural Operations Academy was that exhaustion was not an excuse. The second rule was that exhaustion was the point. Every morning began before the sun rose over New Olympus. A siren tore through the dormitory at 0500. The lights came on white and merciless. For the first week, Luke woke like a miner, violently, instantly, already half inside an emergency that did not exist. His hands searched for helmet seals. His feet looked for magnetic clamps. His lungs expected recycled air with the faint metallic aftertaste of underground ice dust. Instead, he found clean sheets. Warm air. Cadets groaning in expensive bunks. Steve Jones lying face down with a pillow over his head, muttering, "If humanity endured through strength, humanity could endure another 15 minutes. Sarah Palmer was always already awake. Evelyn Fisher always pretended she had slept well. Luke never knew what to do with comfort at the wrong hour. So he stood. He dressed. He ran. They ran beneath the transparent canopy of the northern training yard while Mars watched them from outside. The sky beyond the glass was pale orange before dawn, the color of rust dissolved in water. Frost clung to the outer surface of the dome. Dust moved in long thin veils over the plain. Inside, 30 cadets ran laps around a track polished by generations of ambition. Commander Ileana Graves stood at the center with her hands behind her back. She never shouted. That was worse. Shouting at least gave a person something to resist. Graves simply observed. When someone slowed, she saw it. When someone favored an injured leg, she saw it. When someone looked at the exit before the exercise ended, she saw that too. On the 23rd lap, an older cadet from command tier stumbled and fell hard, palms striking the track. 2 other cadets jumped over him without breaking pace. Luke slowed. Steve, running beside him, hissed, "No." Luke turned. "Don't." Luke was already moving back. Steve cursed. Graves' voice cut across the yard. "Ashford." Luke stopped beside the fallen cadet. The older cadet was breathing too fast, one hand locked around his ankle. Graves said, "Continue running." Luke looked at the injured cadet. Then at Graves. "He's hurt. The med drone is 30 meters away. It hasn't moved. It will." The cadet on the ground tried to speak, covered in shame, "I'm fine." He was not fine. Luke could see the swelling already forming above the boot seal. The others continued running in a circle around them, eyes forward, pretending not to watch. Graves took one step closer. "This is not the mine." Luke answered, "No, Commander." "Then why are you behaving as if you are still there?" Luke bent down and lifted the cadet's arm over his shoulder. "Because his ankle doesn't know where we are." A few cadets missed their stride. Steve closed his eyes in despair. The med drone finally arrived, skimming above the track with a soft mechanical hum. It scanned the cadet, projected a brace field around the ankle, and announced a partial ligament rupture. Graves looked at the drone. Then at Luke. "You have failed the exercise." Luke nodded. "Yes, Commander." "You understand why?" "Because I stopped running." "No." Graves stepped closer. "Because you still believe the moral world is visible at the scale of one body." Luke did not understand. She knew he did not. "Run 10 more laps after the others finish." "Yes, Commander." "And Ashford?" "Yes?" "Carry Cadet Holt to medical first." Luke blinked. For the first time since arriving at the academy, Graves almost smiled. Efficiency should never require stupidity. Steve passed behind Luke and whispered, "I hate you," in increasingly sophisticated ways. Luke smiled. He carried the injured cadet to medical. Then he ran 10 more laps alone. By the end, his lungs burned, his legs shook, and every privileged cadet in the yard knew his name. Not all admired him. But none forgot him. The academy did not transform Luke quickly. It attacked him from every direction. In orbital mechanics, equations opened like doors into spaces he had never imagined. He had understood underground stress fields and ice fracture patterns almost by instinct, but celestial navigation required a different kind of mind. Nothing stayed still. Everything fell forever around everything else. Professor Nadir Salim once asked him to calculate a transfer window from Mars to the asteroid belt. Luke gave the wrong answer by 6 days. The class laughed. Not cruelly at first. Then cruelly because he reddened. Celine waited until the laughter finished. "Cadet Fisher," she said. Evelyn straightened. "Yes, Professor?" "Correct him." Evelyn did. Beautifully. Effortlessly. She derived the solution step by step, her voice calm, symbols unfolding across the board in clean lines of light. Luke watched every movement. Not resentfully. Hungrily. After class he stayed behind staring at the equations. Evelyn found him there 10 minutes later. "You missed the meal bell." Luke did not look away from the board. "I know. Are you punishing yourself?" "No." "Then what are you doing?" "Trying to see where I stopped understanding." Evelyn hesitated. She had expected embarrassment. Defensiveness. Maybe anger. Not that. She stepped beside him. "There." She pointed to the third line. "You treated the asteroid as if it were waiting for you." Luke frowned. "It isn't?" Evelyn laughed once. "No. Nothing waits in space." Luke smiled slightly. "That's inconvenient. It's also the entire subject." She erased the solution and rewrote the first equation. "Again. You're teaching me? You saved Holt's ankle this morning. I'm investing in future emergency services." They stayed until the lights dimmed automatically. That night Luke missed dinner. Evelyn brought him a ration bar from the refectory. He accepted it with exaggerated solemnity. "I owe you my life. You owe me your homework." "That's worse." She smiled. It was the first time Luke saw Evelyn not as a perfect product of the scientific tier, but as a person who enjoyed being useful more than being admired. That difference mattered. Sarah helped him in different ways. Where Evelyn thought in elegant abstractions, Sarah thought in systems. She could look at a machine diagram and hear what would fail first. Her father designed extraction platforms. Her mother audited industrial accidents. Sarah had grown up inside engineering reports the way Luke had grown up inside mine shafts. One evening she found Luke in the simulator lab trying to reconfigure a control glove. He had disassembled it completely. Parts covered the table. Sarah stopped in the doorway. "Did the glove insult you?" Luke looked up. "It was lagging." "It was lagging because you reversed the tactile feedback coupler." "I did?" "Yes. That explains the burning smell." She crossed the room and sat opposite him. "You know you can request technical support." "I know." "Then why dismantle it?" "Because if it fails during synchronization, asking politely won't help." Sarah considered this. Then she picked up the coupler. "My father says technicians maintain civilization because officers are too proud to read warning lights. My father said miners maintain civilization because engineers assume ice reads manuals." Sarah laughed. Together our fathers could have insulted every profession on Mars. Luke smiled. That's how unity begins. They rebuilt the glove together. By the end, it worked better than before. Sarah looked genuinely impressed. "You didn't learn this in school?" "No." "Where?" "My father taught me some. The rest I learned because old machines either teach you or kill you." Sarah became quiet. The sentence had no self-pity in it. That made it worse. She gently turned the glove over in her hands. "People at the academy think labor tier means untrained." Luke shrugged. "People in labor tier think academy means useless." "Do you?" "Less than before." She smiled. Progress. He looked around the room, at machines worth more than his old mining block. Do you ever wonder why people like me only get here if something explodes first? Sarah did not answer immediately. That was how Luke knew he had asked a real question. Finally she said, yes. It was not much. It was enough. Steve helped him by refusing to help. Or so Steve claimed. In practice, he became Luke's translator into cynicism. Whenever a regulation sounded noble, Steve explained who benefited. Whenever an instructor praised sacrifice, Steve asked whose children were being sacrificed. Whenever a ceremony honored workers, Steve counted how many workers were invited to speak. At first Luke found this exhausting. Then he began to notice Steve was rarely wrong. They were assigned together to night maintenance in the lower simulator bays, where old neural rigs were repaired before being sent to secondary academies. The work was quiet. Dim blue emergency lighting. Rows of empty chairs. Interface crowns hanging overhead like skeletal halos. Steve lay beneath a console replacing a burned-out signal array. Luke passed him tools. For nearly an hour neither spoke. Then Steve said, "My grandfather saw Earth." Luke froze. The tool in his hand stopped halfway down. What? Not directly. Steve reached out. Connector. Luke handed him the wrong tool. That's a torque key. You just said your grandfather saw Earth. And yet the connector remains necessary. Luke handed him the connector. Steve continued working. He was stationed on Deimos during the Tharsis intercept. Old probe came in from the inner system. No transponder. No drive signature. Command said it was Earth surveillance hardware. What happened? They destroyed it. Luke waited. Steve slid out from under the console. My grandfather said the object didn't behave like a probe. What did it behave like? A coffin. Luke stared at him. Steve sat up, wiping grease from his fingers. It was broadcasting. To Mars? No. Into open space. What did it say? Steve looked toward the hanging interface crowns. That's the part that ended his career. Luke lowered his voice. What did it say? Steve answered flatly. Do you require assistance? The simulator bay seemed suddenly colder. Luke almost laughed because the words made no sense. That's impossible. Yes. Earth doesn't offer assistance. Correct. Then it was a trick. That's what Command said. And your grandfather? Steve smiled without humor. He asked why a machine trying to deceive us would sound like a rescue worker. Luke had no answer. Steve returned under the console. After that, he remained security tier until retirement. No promotions. No special assignments. No one punished him. They just stopped seeing him. Luke leaned against the console. Why are you telling me this? Because you still think the system only crushes people by accident. The old machinery hummed around them. Luke stood silently for a long time. Then he passed Steve the correct tool before being asked. While Luke learned machinery, Angel learned power. Her classrooms were brighter. Her instructors softer. Her exams more dangerous. In the administrative college, no one practiced rescue drills. No one vomited after neural synchronization. No one ran until their muscles failed. They learned budgets. Population models. Ration curves. Labor allocation. Psychological stability indexes. Every number represented bodies, and very few instructors said that aloud. Professor Adrian Cruz was the most admired teacher in the college. He was elegant, white-haired, exacting, and spoke with the sorrowful calm of a man forever explaining necessary suffering to sentimental children. On the first day of colonial governance, he wrote an equation across the wall: civilization equals resources times order. Angel copied it carefully. Cruz turned toward the room. What destroys civilizations? A student answered, war. Cruz shook his head. Another said, resource depletion. No. Disease. No. AI dependence. Symptom. He let the silence ripen. Then he said, unbounded compassion. The words landed like a moral law. Every civilization generates suffering. The immature administrator asks how to eliminate suffering. The serious administrator asks how much suffering civilization can absorb before it fails. He changed the projection. A mine collapse. A hospital triage center. A food shortage simulation. A labor strike. If a physician gives equal treatment to every patient, essential personnel die. If a governor feeds every district equally during shortage, productive districts collapse. If a supervisor halts a mine after every fatality, the colony loses water. If one life is allowed to overrule structural necessity, all lives are endangered. Angel wrote faster. The logic was clean. Hard. Beautiful in the way a knife is beautiful. Cruz turned off the images. Human beings survive because someone, somewhere, is willing to count what others can only mourn. That evening Angel found Luke in the observation corridor outside the simulator wing. He was still wearing synchronization marks at his temples, small red circles where the interface needles had pressed too long. You look terrible, she said. I feel upgraded. That's not an answer. It's the Academy version of an answer. She smiled and walked beside him. The corridor overlooked the lower transit rings of New Olympus. Trains moved silently beneath glass. Administrative workers flowed in clean patterns. Far below, maintenance crews repaired a ventilation artery no one above them would ever notice. Angel told Luke about Cruz's lecture. At first casually. Then more carefully, because Luke had stopped smiling. What? She asked. Say the equation again. Civilization equals resources times order. Luke looked through the glass. Where do people go in it? Angel paused. The equation is simplified. Most dangerous things are. She frowned. Luke. No, I mean it. He turned to her. In the mine, if a support beam fails, we don't simplify the workers out of the tunnel. That's not what Cruz means. What does he mean? That leadership requires decisions at scale. Scale doesn't bleed. Angel looked away, irritated because the sentence was not an argument and still somehow struck home. He softened. I'm not saying he's wrong about everything. Then what are you saying? Luke watched the maintenance crew below. If a civilization needs people to matter less so the math works. He stopped. Angel finished for him, quietly. Then maybe the math is wrong. He looked at her. She was surprised to hear herself say it. So was he. Neither mentioned the conversation again that night. But Angel did not sleep easily. For the first time, she began to suspect that administrative language did not merely describe reality. It protected its speakers from seeing it. Months passed. The Academy became seasons. Dust storms turned the outer domes opaque for weeks. Inside, life continued under artificial weather. Winter was simulated because humans needed calendars more than Mars provided them. Founders' Day approached. New Olympus transformed. Banners descended from towers. Children rehearsed the oath of Exodus in school courtyards. Broadcasts replayed the old speeches of Trump and Musk beside footage of the first landing ships. Every public screen carried the same phrase, "The frontier remembers." Luke had always loved Founders' Day. In the mining fields it meant shortened shifts, extra protein, public music, and one night when miners pretended they were not tired. In New Olympus it was different. Grander. More polished. Less intimate. Angel's father delivered the central address from the Plaza of Continuity beneath the largest dome. Thousands gathered. Luke stood with the cadets in formal uniform, shoulder to shoulder, while Marcus Vallon rose before the crowd. Behind him, the statues of the progenitors glowed gold. Marcus began with the ritual words. Earth chose silence. The crowd answered, Mars chose the stars. Earth chose obedience. Mars chose the human will. Earth chose comfort. Mars chose independence. Luke spoke the responses with everyone else. He felt their power. He also felt the discomfort growing somewhere beneath them. Marcus continued. Our founders did not cross the void so their descendants might ask whether sacrifice was fair. They crossed it so that humanity would endure when fairness itself had died. Applause thundered. Luke clapped. Then he saw the old man fall. It happened near the edge of the plaza, where maintenance crews stood behind a barrier separating them from the official assembly. An elderly ventilation worker staggered, tried to catch himself on a rail, and collapsed. His tool bag spilled open. People glanced down and stepped aside. The speech continued. No one wanted to interrupt the ceremony. Luke waited 1 second. 2. The old man did not move. Luke stepped out of formation. Steve whispered, Of course. Evelyn reached for him but stopped. Angel saw Luke moving from across the plaza. Marcus saw him too. Luke crossed directly in front of the cadet line, past the ceremonial guards, and climbed over the barrier into the maintenance section. Several people stared as if he had violated sacred architecture. He knelt beside the old worker. Sir? Can you hear me? The man's eyes fluttered. Luke checked his pulse. Weak. Breathing shallow. Heat exhaustion, maybe. Or cardiac stress. Luke looked up. Medic. No one moved immediately. The nearest official hesitated, glancing toward the stage. Luke shouted louder. Medic. This time the shout cut through Marcus's speech. The plaza fell into uneven silence. A medical drone finally descended. Luke helped stabilize the worker, loosening his collar, lifting his head, speaking to him as if they were alone in a mine instead of being watched by half the capital. The old man gripped Luke's wrist. Don't make trouble, he whispered. Luke stared at him. Even half-conscious, the man was afraid of becoming an inconvenience. Something in Luke hardened. The drone lifted the worker onto a stretcher field and carried him away. Luke stood. The entire plaza watched. Marcus Vallon stood at the podium, face unreadable. Angel was pale. Commander Graves looked almost proud and deeply annoyed. For several seconds no one knew what the ceremony was now. Then Marcus spoke. Cadet Ashford. His voice carried across the plaza. Luke straightened. Yes, Administrator. Marcus looked at the crowd. Then back at Luke. Thank you. Applause began uncertainly. Then grew. Not because everyone approved. Because Marcus had approved, and the crowd understood signals better than feelings. Luke returned to formation. Steve leaned toward him. You interrupted Founders Day. Luke whispered, he needed help. That's going on your tombstone. Angel did not laugh. Her father resumed the speech. But the rhythm had broken. For the rest of the ceremony, Luke could not hear the grand words without seeing the old man's hand gripping his wrist. Don't make trouble. Not thank you. Not help me. Don't make trouble. That was the prayer Mars had taught its lowest citizens.